Welcome to Firebase. I'm your host, Gary French. You know, some years ago, friends, I became very concerned about the political climate of our land. And I'll let you know that it was from a twofold or two-pronged concern. One, I was concerned that the politicians seem to always be in office, and they'll say things like, "We're fighting hard for you." And it seems like the only thing they were fighting hard for was to get re-elected. And the other concern of that prong is this, the sense of apathy from the people who vote or don't vote. I talked to a gentleman just recently, and he says, "You know what, I just don't vote anymore. It doesn't make any difference." And this guy was claiming to be just a very strong patriot. And he says, "It's always having to vote for the lesser of two evils." And I looked at him and I told him, I said, "Friend, unless Jesus Christ is on the ballot, it will always be the lesser of two evils." Well, friends, you need to know this is something that I've shared many times on this program from this platform. America is in trouble, in deep trouble. And I don't say that with any sense of joy. Don't even say it with animosity. I say it from a position of observation and conviction. In my lifetime, never before have I seen such rancor, division, animosity, and such little respect for the American people. It seems like a lot of people take the views that these freedoms that we have in America, given by God, are only granted by the government, and the government can take away. Think about this. The U.S. Congress is divided, and the members in the Congress seem only interested in their own political agenda. The country is divided, it seems, between socialists and communists and liberals and conservatives, and we can't even seem to disagree to agree or agree to disagree or whatever nonsense that statement is supposed to mean. I just don't like that. And recently I came across an article about the EPA wanting to take away more of your rights merely because they can. The EPA seems to be bent on pursuing the removal of anything or anyone that produces or even, dare I say it, passes gas. That's true. Well, some years ago, I came across an organization called the Convention of States. And I saw this and it captured my attention. It really did, because here's what the Convention of States is all about. Returning the sovereign rights of Americans back to Americans. On tonight's show, we are welcoming Mary Jo Wedding. And Mary Jo, welcome to our show. I hope I pronounced that right, because when I first saw your email and I saw wedding, I thought, was somebody by the name of Mary Jo inviting me to a wedding? Is it a shower or what?
Well, that is funny. That's funny. So, well, and I'll explain why that's funny on my last name here in just a second. But thank you for inviting me out to speak about the Convention of States. Again, my name is Mary Jo Wedding, and I had to send my birth certificate, my marriage license, to Facebook to change my name to Wedding because they thought it was a fake name. So that was funny. I've never assumed that I would have to prove who I was to a social media company, but again, thank you for inviting me to talk about the convention.
We are so glad here. Mary Jo, I find it almost ironic that Facebook, thinking that your last name is fake, and they have been in times past the epitome of fake news, along with so many other things that they would want to validate. I wonder if they had some kind of person vetting you or checking it out to make sure that you were correct, that you were who you say you are.
It could have been. My husband's last name on Facebook isn't the full name. It wouldn't accept it. With mine, they required me to send my marriage license proving that my name was Wedding.
Well, listen, let me ask you this, that in case you'll see it on the screen, that Mary Jo is the state director for the Convention of States here in Kentucky. And let me ask you just a couple of things right here. What is the purpose of Convention of States?
So the purpose of Convention of States, first off, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, 501c3. And the purpose of Convention of States is to utilize Article 5 of our Constitution to have our state legislators call for a convention that would impose certain things on our federal government, such as potentially term limits for Congress or unelected officials, placing the federal government back in its constitutional jurisdictional borders, and or require the federal government to be fiscally responsible. All of those
even
items require.
Mary Jo, even as you say that, my first thought is every American should say, "Hey, that's awesome."
It should.
But how's it been, pardon me, how's it been received?
So by the citizens, almost all of the citizens that we speak to are for term limits, to be honest. Our legislators, not so much. They're not for the term limits. It's a little more challenging with our citizenry, on both sides of the aisle, when you start talking about fiscal restraints, right? Yeah. Fiscal responsibility. Those that are on the right support the fiscal responsibility. Those on the left, not necessarily support curbing the federal spending. Yeah. Balanced budget, again, it's the spending. Scope and jurisdiction, again, it's kind of left and right. Right wants less federal control, left wants more federal control. So across the board, in Kentucky, we have almost 50,000 petition signers for a convention of states, and over 2 million, I think it's 2.5 million petition signers nationwide.
Yeah, it is. That's the last statistics that I've read, 2.5 million. And I want you to know, I want the audience to know, I signed up. I'm one of those petitioners here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And sadly, it seems to me, and I have jokingly said on occasions, and I've even done it on the air, and it doesn't win me a lot of friends, especially from the left, that I've called the Commonwealth, the Communist Commonwealth of Kentucky, because it seems like some segments of our political diehards, right, they're only content with their rights and the removal of mine. Is that one of the things, trying to put it in just very layman terms for people, is that one of the things that's prompted convention of states come around and say, no, we've got to return the rights back to the citizens?
Well, it's not only to return the rights back to the citizens, but to educate the citizens on the rights that they've lost. Not most, but a good portion of our citizenry is not aware or doesn't understand the idea of self-governance, right? So Citizens for Self-Governance, which is our founder, is educating the public on that.
And it was Convention of States started in 2013, I believe, yes. I would have hoped, and I don't want to sound pessimistic, I would have hoped that there would have been a much broader support from the American people. But having said that, you guys, this organization is making progress. Is that right?
They are. We currently have, I think, 3 states, if I'm not mistaken, have current legislation on currently enacting, and they're debating currently right now in 3 different states. Kentucky's out of session, so we won't bring that back up again in Kentucky until January. But it's moving. We're educating legislators, we're educating citizens. So various states, Massachusetts passed a committee last session. So, right. So the word's out there, people are learning, and the legislators are learning even more.
That sounds hopeful to me. Does it seem like it's that it will pass in Kentucky?
Well, I would love to say yes. I know we have about 50% support in the House and just shy of 50% support in the Senate. But to get it across the floor on both the House and the Senate, you really need about 65% in both chambers. So we're working on that.
Yeah, here in Kentucky, is there any legislator, any senator that you would feel comfortable in saying, hey, these people support it? Or are you hesitant to do that?
Well, absolutely. Senator Robbie Mills, who happens to be the running mate for Daniel Cameron in the governor's race. Senator Mills has been our supporter and our sponsor in the Senate for a number of years now. So that is wonderful. He's an advocate for the Convention of States.
Well, by association, does that mean that Daniel Cameron is in support too, or has he even made a position on that?
He hasn't spoken. We haven't talked to Daniel Cameron. Typically, we stay clear of the election process, But it
Sure.
just so happens that Senator Mills happens to be the lieutenant governor and our Senate sponsor.
Oh,
Jason,
okay.
and then we have a number of supporters and sponsors in the House.
Right.
So we have Walker Thomas, that's a sponsor. We have actually Philip Wheeler is in the Senate. He just came on board. So there's been a number of different legislators in the Senate.
Wow,
In the
that's
House.
awesome. I think that
Yeah.
when we come back from the break here, let's talk about what's the importance of this kind of a convention. What's the necessity for the American people to be educated on an Article 5 convention? And what you hope to happen. And
Absolutely.
let me go ahead and call out Daniel Cameron. I know Daniel. I remember when he was chief legal counsel for Mitch McConnell, and I like Senator McConnell, but you know it's time for him to retire too, and it's time for us to retire Andy Bashir as well. So I'm going to call out. It's just say, Daniel Cameron, you need to go ahead and support this Article 5 Convention of States. Folks, talking with Mary Jo Wedding here at the Kentucky Convention of States. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Spending our evening here with Mary Jo Wedding of the Kentucky Convention of States, and I've had to write down some notes, but as I often do, friends, I write down a lot of notes, and then I find a guest so interesting that I forget about my notes and say, let's just wing it and see what we got. And Mary Jo is the kind of person that has a very infectious smile and very pleasant personality, and she seems to be the right person for the right time at this. I don't know if you want to call it a job or calling or ever how you view it, Mary Jo, but I imagine being a state director here in the Commonwealth for Convention of States has been challenging.
Well, it's not challenging. It's time consuming, right? So very time consuming, but it's a lot of fun. I meet a lot of people, and it's for a good cause. It's to
Yeah.
save the republic. So
How did things go out at the state fair? I was supposed to be out there, but I was so sick that week, and I don't ever get sick, but I was sick that week. How did things go? I know you had a booth out there at the
we did.
Kentucky State Fair.
We set up a booth. We acquired a little over 1,700 petitions.
Wow.
And so that was really good. That was our second year we'd set up for the state fair. So, and it's 11 days process, and we had 35 volunteers to come out and help us
Wow.
work on the booth and collect petitions. So, yeah.
Okay,
so
well, let me ask the obvious right here. Number one, what is Article 5?
Okay. So Article 5 is, of course, Article 5 of our U.S. Constitution. And what it states is Article 5 addresses how the Constitution can be amended. Now, under Article 5, the Constitution can only be amended two ways. One, through our Congress, just like all of our other amendments have been amended. Congress, 2/3 of Congress has to vote on an amendment. If it passes 2/3, then it will ultimately be sent to the states for ratification. The second method, which is through what we are trying to accomplish in the Convention of States, is that 2/3 of the states can call for a state convention to discuss amendments to the Constitution. Now, with that said, 34 states, 2/3 of the states have to pass the same resolution. So Convention of States resolution is term limits, fiscal responsibility, and to reduce the scope and jurisdiction. So currently right now, we have 19 states that have passed that resolution calling for those three subject matters to be discussed at a convention.
Some of the concerns that I've seen over the last few years has been governmental overreach, and it seems like every time the government gets a little bit of power, they lust for more, and in their lust, they will do anything. I'm from the country, as my folks would say, come hell or high water, they'll do anything not only to get power, but when they are so addicted to the power, they lust after it, and they will try to convince you that they're really working for you. And that leads me to a question that the Convention of States website asks: why call an Article 5 convention?
Why call? Because federal government is not going to fix itself. Congress is not going to put a stop to their federal overreach, their spending. So it is up to we, the people. And that's usually what I tell all of the individuals that I speak to. Article 5 empowers the citizens through our state legislators to stop and to make changes, whereas Congress is not going to do it on themselves. They're not going to turn their limits.
Yeah.
They're not going to stop the spending. And they're not going to reduce their power. But so that is why we need a convention. We need a convention because who we send to Congress is not willing to make the necessary changes.
So what you're talking, what you're talking
it.
about is just returning power back to the people.
Back to the people and back to the states. The 10th Amendment gives the states the authority to govern themselves, but through various methods and reasons and laws and changes and Supreme Court rulings, the federal government has been able to retain that. And that's a lot of the statements for those who don't support necessarily the convention. They'll say, well, we don't want to change the Constitution. We're not talking about actually physically changing. We're more talking about putting guardrails up around our current Constitution now. Right.
Well, that sounds like that's a battle of like putting a border down between the United States and Mexico, and
the federal government's not doing that either, are they?
I know, that's right. I tried to make it very simple about the 10th Amendment, and I challenge people to go read that. One of the best sources out there is Rick Green from Texas, about the Constitution Coach. Rick was
Academy.
Rick was the first guest that I ever had on Firebase, and I've had a lot of people on my show that were guests on my show. John Graves with Million Voices, and a lot of these people that they weren't well known then. And now, and I'm going to call them out here, now they're so well known, I can't get them back on the show because I've got all these buffers to go through. Okay, well, as the little lady would say, don't get me started on that. Well, one of the things that the 10th Amendment, and I want to make it simple, is that the federal government should not be superior to the state government, and my little local government should have rights and privileges over the county government, which should have rights and value over the state government, which should have. We've inverted the paradigm, haven't we? We've made the federal government like a deity.
Exactly.
And whatever they say goes. And now we've got people that are in office, and I call them part of the shadow government, that they're there. And it boils down to this, and I like this, and I'm borrowing this from the Convention of States website. It boils down to one question: who do you think should decide what's best for you and your family? You or the feds? I think that's a great question that your organization is asking. What's the importance of that?
It is, absolutely. So who decides means, do we want to decide what happens to our family in our state, in our community, or do we want to leave every decision up to Washington, D.C.? Of course, Washington, D.C. wants to make all of the decisions and send them down our way. So that's where the who decides comes in, is strengthening the 10th Amendment so that we decide in a self-governing nation, which is what we are, we should have that decision to make.
I think that's awesome. I tell people without hesitation, without any reservation, I am a Christian conservative. My faith is first, and I'm a conservative. I'm not a Christian nationalist, whatever that's supposed to mean, but I do believe in our nation, but I also believe in God Almighty. I've spoken to, because I believe Jesus Christ really is the way, the truth, and the life. I've spoken with elected politicians here in Kentucky about the conventions of states, and they seem to be rather hesitant, without mentioning a name that you and I spoke to off the air. Why do you think some politicians are so hesitant to say, yes, we should do the Convention of States?
It actually, the reasons they are hesitant falls into probably two categories. One, of political nature. There are most of our congressional members have a lot of influence over our state legislators. Again, top down type of thing. And so they don't want to buck that system or the fundraisers or their PACs that they're receiving political funds from. So they toe the line. They're hesitant about moving forward because those individuals that may be funding their campaign or contributing don't want it to happen. So that's one category of our state legislators.
Yeah. You know, I was speaking to an elected official some years ago, and he was talking with me, and he said, Dr. French, you would be surprised at the influence of the lobbyists in Washington, D.C. And now doesn't look like he's going to get out of office anytime soon himself. So it's like, oh man. Okay, folks, we are talking with Mary Jo Wedding and with Convention of States here in Kentucky. We will continue this conversation and wrap it all up tonight after this break. Welcome back, folks. Glad you've spent the evening with us here. I really enjoyed this program tonight. I love talking about my faith. I love talking about my country. And I love talking about the God-given constitutional guaranteed rights that we have. And I love talking with somebody that knows a lot of the same people that I do. To that end, we've been talking to Mary Jo Wedding. And Mary Jo, I just want you to know it's a delight to have you on the program this evening, and I just find that your smile is very infectious, as I've already commented, and the insight that you brought has been very powerful. I want to give you the opportunity now to let people know of the significance of the Kentucky Convention of States, how they can be involved in any upcoming events that are going on, and why this is so important right now.
Okay. Well, first, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for this opportunity. So for those citizens in Kentucky and world countrywide, right? So it doesn't just pertain to Kentucky. For those of you who want to get more involved or even learn more about the Convention of States, please go to conventionstates.com. There is all kinds of information out there. If you're possibly interested in volunteering or getting more involved than just signing a petition, you can actually go to the Take Action tab and fill out an application to be a volunteer. And when I say it's an application, it just comes to us, grassroots team, where we can speak one-on-one to each individual that either wants to learn more about what Article 5 is and what the Convention of States is, or if they want to participate in our events and help us as a team. We are all volunteers. None of us are paid. We all volunteer, both from the state director, which is my role, all the way down to volunteer activists, which are individuals and volunteers that make phone calls or work at events and things like that. So we appreciate the support. We are a nonprofit, so we do appreciate all the volunteer activity we get. For those of you who are not familiar with Article 5, again, Article 5 is in our Constitution. It does give we the people, the opportunity through our state legislators to make changes or to propose changes that will help secure our state rights and reduce the federal control over us citizens, both in Kentucky and all of our 50 states. So again, reach out. You can reach me. I'm going to go ahead and give my number because everyone has it. If you want to speak to me directly, you can give me a call, 859-802-3572. I am more than happy to talk to anyone who wants to learn more about Article 5 in the Convention of States. Thank you.
Oh, man, Mary Jo, as you were talking, I don't know why I didn't think about this earlier, but the Article 5 and what you're doing, returning the rights, and of the citizens, that ties in with the First Amendment. The First Amendment provides that Congress make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. I love that. That's the first one. Yes. It protects freedom of speech, the press, assembly. Some people think that the First Amendment is all about freedom of speech and that's it. But here's the other part, the right to petition the government for redress of grievances.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
if there's ever been a time in our country's history, there's a lot of grievances right now. We have people in office that are, and I'm a senior citizen now too, but we've got some people that are in office that have just been there way, way too long. I mean, how many more brain freezes do you have to have, and how much more stumbling and shuddering around do we have to have before we realize we need to be nicer and kinder to our senior citizens? And I think there's an addictive nature of power that's there. In 15 seconds or so, what do you really hope to happen with this convention of states here in Kentucky?
Well, in Kentucky, I hope this next session coming up that we're able to pass the resolution with our state legislators with a super majority in the Kentucky General Assembly. There really is no reason why we can't pass this in Kentucky.
Wow.
So that's what I'd like to see happen.
Yeah, well said. You would think with a super majority, we had a lot more conservatism in our Commonwealth.
You would
Folks,
think.
thanks for being with us tonight. Make sure you reach out to Convention of States. And until next week, we look forward to seeing you then. God bless. Thanks for watching this most recent episode. Click below the like button. Provide any comments that you like. Also, we will get back to you as soon as we can after you write to us at P.O. Box 39, Perry Park, Kentucky, 40363. Also, let us know if you like really good coffee, and we'll send that out to you as soon as we possibly can. What's the name of the coffee? Firebase.